Hello and welcome to .com Virtual Pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Ekman, and I'm joined today by Bill Leon.
Hello. Or should I say...
and Hawk Ripjaw.
He's really coughing.
I know, but it was like an on-purpose cough. It was stage coughing.
What a classy way to begin this episode.
You're a good cough actor.
Thanks.
Oh man, that actually reminds me. I was just rewatching the third season of Deadwood, and there's this character in it who, like this actor who's dying, and his coughs have that kind of weird, like, chest cough with the gurgling that is. Whoever did the sound design on those episodes, holy shit, they found the grossest cough they could find. Anyway, so we have some movies to talk about. The first thing we're going to talk about is a little something that Bill Leon and I watched over the New Year's when we did a little bit of a movie marathon. The one movie we saw that what was that?
I just to go into that a little bit. I mean, we performed an endurance test on Sunday, which I honest to God wish that, like, we had the resources and the audience to, like, raise money for charity doing stuff like that, because that would be awesome. But we did it anyway for free because
we can look into that next year. It's pretty, it's easier than you would think.
Yeah, it's something to look into. I'm not sure how much people would give us for bullshitting, but if they want to, why not?
There are people that raise money for charity playing video games now. Like,
That's true. That said, the first thing we watched, which Bill Leon made, I would say, a qualified argument that it could be considered a movie, which is Finding Francis, the final episode of the 4th season of Nathan For You. Now, Bill, I'm going to let you explain why this qualifies as a movie.
Well, first of all, it's a feature-length project, and it did get a premiere in a theater, and there were a lot of people that came out for that, a lot of people very enthusiastic for that. But as far as the contents of the episode/movie, and I say that because basically I'm making a defense that this will probably make my top 10 movies of the year list, and I think, like, it's a little documentary about this one man's life, kind of, Bill Heath, and simultaneously there's the stuff with Nathan, and which kind of carries over from the TV show, which, because Bill Heath is from the TV show, like, it all kind of comes together in this weird way. It's like documentary plus possible fiction plus the lore of Nathan For You, which, I mean, it felt like the Nathan For You movie. That's
part of what makes Nathan For You great in that respect, is that you're never really sure how much of Nathan is the actor and how much is the character. Mm-hmm. And there's a kind of disbelief, like, is that really a thing that happened? Like the mom and pop electronics store where he hid $1 TVs behind a doggy door within a room with an alligator. Like, was there really a storefront that was doing that, or was it part of the staging for the show? And I think that disbelief, where it really could go either way, is what makes it so effective.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, for my own personal experience, because I've only seen a handful of episodes of Nathan For You, and the ones I have seen were mostly from the earlier seasons. Not having the context of the previous episodes to go on, I fully am behind calling this a film, because it is a self-contained story that...
Anything you need to know about Bill Heath and his appearance on the show is covered in the first, like, 2 minutes of the thing.
Mm-hmm. Right, and this is, it's a self-contained story, and as a documentary, what it does, this is not a informational documentary so much as it's a slice of life, and the way it tells its story does blur the line between fact and fiction, because there's some elements in it that could be staged, but there's just enough reasonable doubt there, where you're not quite sure what all is actually happening. And what's intriguing about it is that ultimately that's not what matters, because a very compelling human story is being told one way or another. And of course there's humor, and Nathan likes to inject humor into his story. And particularly the subplot within Finding Francis about him slowly falling in love with a paid escort that that he bumbled into hiring for. Allegedly, it was hired originally to give Bill like more experience in communicating with people, but then he decided to just see her himself, because wasn't it that he wasn't interested, or
he says this to Nathan. He's like, "You got to know what you're sticking it in."
Oh God, that's the other thing that's fascinating about it, is this. While it is a human story and ultimately kind of a fascinating one, speaking of blurring reality and fiction, it's not entirely, you're not entirely sure what this guy's motives are about seeking this woman that he says that he met so long ago and never, he keeps saying, I should have married her. And you get the feeling that, what does he want from this? What does he expect from it? He hasn't spoken to this lady in so long. What really gets me is they get all the way to the point where he without going into too much spoiler territory, they get to the point where he is about to confront her, and the way they go about confronting is an unexpected twist that is interesting, and it's also respectful, because I'm not sure that it would have been the right thing to turn this guy loose on this person. He verges into stalker territory pretty close. There's creeper elements to him, and that's the thing. While there are creeper elements to him, you can't help but kind of like him, because he's got this personality to him that's funny and intriguing. So you have such mixed feelings about it.
There was on, and I don't know if you've watched it yet, Ken, but Tickled. I went on the Nathan For You subreddit like a few days after this episode aired, and somebody wrote like, to the person who recommended Tickled after Finding Francis, thank you.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like, okay, yeah, because it's sort of this like journey of uncovering things, like this constantly, there's just layers building on top of layers.
I mean, the main difference being that in Tickled, what is revealed is that this guy is, in every way, shape, and form, a complete creep. On the other hand, this is a sweeter story. I can see the comparison between the two, but yeah, this is definitely not like Tickled. Tickled got just plain fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Errol Morris, the famous documentary filmmaker, wrote an article that was published in the New Yorker called "The Nathan For You Finale: My New Favorite Love Story." It was published December 5th of 2017.
Oh, I read that one.
Yes, and Bill, I sent you a comment that he had made, but I don't think, did you read the full article that he wrote?
No, you sent me a tweet that he made, and I didn't know that it went beyond that. I would love to read that. So
yeah, it's a full thing. I'll go ahead and send that to you in Facebook so that you can read that later. But I'm going to read just the first paragraph of this, because I think it's kind of a nice little summary. He said, "When I was working on my first film, Gates of Heaven, about 2 California pet cemeteries, I would often think about love, the love of one person for another. It always seemed a tenuous affair at best. And what if one of the parties is dead? Perhaps even more tenuous. Okay, let me extend this a bit further. What if one of the parties is a dog, and not just a dog, a dead dog? This is the kind of love that interests me. Love is a kind of abject hopefulness. Can one fall in love with nothing, with just the desire to be in love?"
That's the first paragraph of his thoughts on Finding Frances?
Yes.
That's oddly profound.
Well, Errol Morris is a profound son of a bitch. If you've seen his documentaries, he goes there in a lot of ways.
On our New Year's stream, Ken followed up Finding Frances with the film Gates of Heaven.
Specifically because when I was watching Finding Frances, I got this. This is the rabbit hole I went through while watching Finding Frances. I kept feeling like, wow, the way this is being told, kind of, it's not Errol Morris in style, but in like the way it's capturing just regular people, it kind of reminded me of it. And so I just typed in Finding Frances and Errol Morris, and the first thing that came up was that tweet where he was praising it. And then so I went into there, and this New Yorker article I found in my research a day after that. But the fact is that Morris is probably one of the most profound humanistic documentary filmmakers out there. And the fact that he praised just, what for all rights, should just be a season finale of a Comedy Central TV series, and gives it the kind of praise that a person would give a fine piece of art, that speaks volumes to the quality of that friggin' episode of a TV show.
I know the rest of Nathan For You. So like I was going to compare it to Monty Python, but that doesn't really make any sense. Monty Python's never done anything especially sincere. But like, yes, Nathan For You as a TV series is very absurdist. But there is sort of this running thread through the show of Nathan wants acceptance by his peers and Nathan wants companionship. And this film, despite being Bill Heath's story, like you said, there's the subplot about Nathan, which is kind of, I hope this isn't the end of the show. I hope they make more of it because it is so goddamn funny and creative. But if this was the final thing for Nathan For You, like, it would be appropriate.
Oh, yeah, certainly. And Bill, I'm interested to hear, and in fact, Hawk, I think you should read this article too. I posted it in our chat for you guys to read.
Okay.
Because
I need to check that out.
Because Morris does have a lot of really fascinating things to say about Nathan Fielder and his show. And by the way, Morris himself had a documentary-based TV series in the, I think, early 2000s, maybe late 90s. I forget exactly when, called First Person. And
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it was on, I think, IFC or something. And the concept of that show was just each episode was a half-hour one-on-one interview with people and their interesting lives. For instance, it interviewed, notably, this person whose life's obsession was to find the giant squid, which at that point had never been seen alive in the wild. Then there's a person he interviewed. If you're at all familiar with, they made a they made a movie, an HBO movie about her. And now I'm brain farting on her name. She's the autistic woman who designed slaughterhouses.
I don't know this story. I don't know who this woman is.
Okay, Temple Grandin is her name.
Oh, that's her. Okay.
Yeah, Temple Grandin. She's a professor of animal science at Colorado State University, and she's a consultant to basically the industry, the livestock industry, about ways to more
to ride.
Well, one thing
Just sing this song forever.
Yeah, okay. As a person living with autism, she uses her spectrum on her spectrum of her disorder that she has, basically as a way of expressing more humane ways to go about like the process of handling livestock on the way to the slaughterhouse, basically.
So what's next to review?
Well, I know we're getting into some rabbit hole thing. I'm just saying that that's fascinating. If you're not familiar with Morris, that's something to look into. You're right. Good idea to move on. But that Nathan For You episode is damn good.
Yes. We liked it. Check it out. It's great. It'll make my top. I'm willing to bet, unless I see something. No, it's going to make my top 10. Continue with what's up next.
What's up next is Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle.
Jumanji, yes. Okay.
So, it's weird. Like I was talking to my friend, and we mentioned that this was coming out. This was a conversation when I saw Star Wars that was coming out. She said, "I literally hate that movie now because I've seen the commercial at least 40 times." And nobody's expecting to be good either, and everybody said it was fine. So, what did you think?
It's fine.
Yeah,
it's,
I mean,
it's a movie with
supposed to do, right?
Yeah, it's a movie with fucking 6 screenwriters, written in part and directed by Jake Kasdan.
Ooh.
And it's one of those things where, you know, with credits like that, and of course Jake Kasdan, you know, he did direct Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, which you guys I know are big fans of.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy Orange County, but I can't say that I've seen much else of his that I had any interest in.
Didn't he do Sex Tape?
He did do Sex Tape, though I didn't see that one.
It's not good.
Okay. So
yeah,
here's
an interesting career.
Here's the thing about Jumanji. First of all, there are people out there talking about Jumanji and comparing it to the original, saying, you know, basically holding up the original like it's this wonderful children's classic, and it's not. It's a passable 90s children's film with some interesting elements. The CGI does not fucking hold up at all. It's some of the worst CGI you will see in a modern film.
I rewatched it a couple weeks ago, and those spiders are rough stuff.
Oh yeah, and the monkeys too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has. I think what makes it work to an extent is a lot on Robin Williams. His performance is pretty emotional. The idea of this guy who, he I think very admirably plays a kid who grew up in the fucking jungle and is now released and realizes that his entire life has passed him by. That's kind of interesting. But Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle serves as both a sequel, because it does reference some elements of the original movie, and a reboot. First of all, the Jumanji game itself reboots itself. The opening of the film, which the opening of the film is set like a year or two after the events of the first movie. And this other kid comes across the Jumanji board because his dad was running on the beach, finds it in the sand, picks it up, takes it home, and says, "Hey, I found this. You want it?" The kid takes a look at the Jumanji board and says, "Board games? Who plays those anymore?" And he picks up like his video game system and starts playing it. And
that's pretty
as
funny.
As he sleeps that night, the little bulb in the middle of the Jumanji board glows, and when the kid wakes up, he finds that the Jumanji board is not there, and instead there's this weird looking video game system with a cartridge that says Jumanji in it. So basically, I'm not sure what this Jumanji thing is, but it's some sort of weird brain melting sentient creature. That's the only thing.
Have either of you read the Jumanji picture book that the film is based on?
Yeah, all it is
it was so simple, and the moral of it is finish what you start, and which is not a moral present really in the first Jumanji film.
Well, I mean that's how they're able.
Now we're here.
I mean, yeah, but
it is present in the first Jumanji film because the only way they can end the madness is by finishing the game.
But they don't focus on that. By the end of when I was a kid watching that's not the message that I took away from that movie.
Yeah, because there's not really any driving force to continue where they have to continue to be challenged on finishing it.
Yes.
Not to mention, finish what you start is really not that practical of a children's life lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, it's been ages since I haven't seen that book since I was a kid.
It's a cute kid's picture book, and it's very short. It's it's like we just had Christmas. It's like the Snowman picture book. It's a kid's story that is conveyed almost entirely in visuals. I mean, there's very little actual writing in Jumanji, and Or Polar Express is also that way as a book. It's a simple story. I'm not talking about the movie.
I like
Polar Express book is a wonderful children's book.
It's a classic.
So anyway,
all right.
Jumanji, though, Welcome to the Jungle. Basically, this kid wakes up, sees a video game system, plays it, and then disappears. And then the movie fast forwards to present day. And this is where the movie stumbles a little bit in its depiction of these teenage characters. They chose basically 4 of the most basic kid stereotypes that they could come up with. And fortunately, you don't get to hang with them very long. So you get, as long as you can get past the first 15 minutes that sets up these 4 stereotype characters, what makes it entertaining is watching as the nerd boy, the nerd girl, the jock, and the hot girl disappear from the movie and instead are put into the bodies of Dwayne Johnson, Jack Black, Kevin Hart, and Karen Gillan.
Is she a cheerleader or something? I don't know if I'm comfortable with the hot girl.
Well, you see, that's the thing. Her stereotype that she has is kind of like the mean girl, hot girl.
It's like the vapid, phone obsessed.
Oh yeah, there's a scene literally there's a scene where a teacher is trying to teach There's a scene where a teacher's trying to teach her class, and this girl's on the phone Skyping with someone, and the teacher says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Excuse me, I'm going through a thing right now, so if you could just give me some space."
Go to the guidance counselor. Get out of my classroom.
Exactly. People don't actually act the way they're depicted in this. They're just the most extreme stereotypes they could come up with.
I would love to see a kid that was really into this movie try that in life, and then they get detention.
Oh yeah, well they get she gets detention in this movie too. How they wind up in the bodies of these characters is they're sent to, all 4 of these kids manage to get sent to detention on the same day. And their punishment for this detention is they have to clean the back room of the library. And they come across a donation box, and in the donation box is the Jumanji machine. Which of course, teenagers being teenagers are like, fuck cleaning up the library. Let's see what this video game's all about. So they plug it into a TV, and they each choose their character that they're going to be playing as in the game. And the humor comes from the fact that the names don't exactly give away what their characters are. So this is what happens: the nerdy kid, the nerdy boy, goes into the body of Dwayne Johnson and becomes Dr. Smolder Bravestone. And then you have the jock kid goes into the body of a guy named Franklin Mouse Finbar, a zoologist. And so he goes from being from being basically this big tough jock to being Kevin Hart.
Where's the top half of my body? That's a line in the trailer.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have the girl who is sort of the nerdy girl, becomes a character named Ruby Roundhouse, who's described as a killer of men.
I've heard a few critics compare her to Laura Croft.
Oh, definitely. It's a total Laura Croft ripoff. And then finally, the mean girl turns into Jack Black.
Right, and again, trailer totally those are the 2. Aside from The Rock, they do The Rock and the Karen Gillan jokes in the trailers, but really the trailers are I'm short. And I'm a chubby dude I used to be a teenage girl, and now I'm Black.
Being honest, that is really a large portion of the jokes in this movie. But each of these actors finds a way to make their character particularly funny, despite the fact that there's really not much depth to them.
They can die, right? Because one of them dies, and again, this is in the promotional material. They spoiled the joke.
First of all, I am so lucky that I didn't watch any of the trailers for this movie, because I was completely taken aback by the first death. This is what happens: when you're inside of Jumanji, since this is now a video game logic applies. So each of them have 3 lives.
Uh-huh.
And
If they die in Jumanji, if they get game over in Jumanji, do they die in real life?
That's what they insinuate. But no, I mean, this is a PG-13 kids movie, so do you think anyone actually gets game over?
Right. No.
But anyway, and they even pull a Super Mario World thing in one scene where a person gives one of their lives to another person, which you could totally do. That's video game logic.
They must have given away a ton of stuff in the trailer.
Why is that given away in the trailer?
You in the last few minutes, you've basically given a complete rundown of the trailer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like I said, I never saw the fucking trailer.
Yeah.
So a few other things that happen in the as far as video game logic, the people who populate Jumanji, like in video games, only have a handful of lines of dialogue that they can speak because of pre-programming. So, for instance, a character appears at the beginning in what is sort of the introductory portion of the game, and he spouts a few lines of dialogue explaining the setup to the story, and then they ask him a question that's a little off book, and he looks confused and then proceeds to answer again by giving the rundown of the story again. Things like that. And I enjoyed the way that it referenced kind of the cornier aspects of video game logic, particularly NPC comment bubbles and shit like that. And also things like the weaknesses that characters get in games. When you have games with RPG elements, there's always the characters who have specific weaknesses. And in one case, like Kevin Hart's character's weakness is cake. Which makes him spontaneously explode.
What?
Yes.
What?
I don't like that joke.
Well, it's stupid, but it's the stupidity of his commenting on the base level of some video games where you have character like another example is like the character Kevin Hart plays, because he's the character with the backpack that holds all the stuff. His character is ridiculously slow.
Mm-hmm.
And,
what is this, a tactics video game that they're playing?
Well, right. And the thing is, this game, the game was ostensibly created in the mid-90s. And so the kind of game logic it takes on is not dissimilar to like an RPG you would play on Super Nintendo or maybe early PlayStation.
I thought you said the board game just turned into a video game.
Yeah, the board game turned into a video game in like 1996.
Who designed it?
The game? Here's the thing. This movie is not Shakespeare. This is a movie
I want an in-between movie where the Jumanji board game is just playing video games and learning these tropes to where this makes sense.
I think they insinuate that the Jumanji board scanned the video game system that the kid was playing. I think they insinuate that. They don't make it very clear, but the fact is, this is not a movie you analyze. This is a movie that you shove loads of popcorn into your gullet and laugh at the funny things that happen. Because there are a lot of funny things. Bobby Cannavale plays the main villain.
Hey,
Bobby Cannavale.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, and he doesn't have as many scenes as I would hope, but his scenes that he has are kind of he basically plays like the base antagonist that you might see in a video game, and so his character is all evil and he doesn't really have motivation other than to be evil. So that's always fun. And another cameo in the film, is it Reese Darby, who was in Flight of the Conchords. He plays a character named Nigel Billingsley. And Colin Hanks makes a random cameo in the movie too, which is kind of weird. But it's a decent, fun movie that I probably don't need to see again. That's all I'll say about it. It's worth seeing, but don't go pay full price for it.
Yeah, I'll probably wait till the red box.
Yeah, red box it, or say you've got 2 hours to kill and it's like a $5 Tuesday at your theater or something.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so next we have on our list, recently, Bill, you made me a challenge.
I did. No, not just you, but a lot of people. And you are the second person to take it up.
Accept the challenge. Yeah. So I have watched the first season of the BBC America adaptation of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And basically, I was probably the one with the most baggage going into this because I am an avid Douglas Adams fan, and the original Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency book is my favorite book of his, and probably one of my favorite novels ever written. And so this Max Landis showrun and written series, of course, lately Max Landis hasn't exactly been in the most positive of lights in the media for obvious reasons, the whole sexual harassment thing. So I'm not going to address that. I'm only going to speak about this show on its own terms as a series and whether it was funny or not, or entertaining or not. So first of all, Bill Leon, when did you first discover Dirk Gently?
I'm a big Max Landis. Well, I was a big Max Landis fan. I don't. That's.
We're not even gonna.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's because of Max Landis. Because of Max Landis is why I started watching the show.
Okay. All right. So anyway, first of all,
I started watching while the first season was airing. Like you and I had actually watched the pilot.
Yeah, and I honestly wasn't too sold on the pilot when I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I held off so long. But then you issued this challenge, and first of all, I'm going to give you a straight-up answer on one aspect. How does it compare to the books? It doesn't. It's unrecognizable when compared to the books. To the point where I'm a bit miffed that they even call it what they call it, because it is not in the slightest bit. It doesn't have anything to do with what the books are. That said,
I already knew that.
Right. That said, as a series, it's intriguing and it gets more entertaining as it goes along. It has some very funny moments. I think the actor Samuel Barnett, who plays Dirk Gently on the series, is very funny, and he plays Clueless very well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually the biggest division between this and the books is Dirk Gently in the books can seem clueless, but that he always has something on his mind behind it. He's more of a con man than he is a moron, although he's not the smartest person in the world either. But in this, he's pretty much just a straight up kind of dope who just happens to be quite lucky a lot.
Yes. I mean, I don't know what the whole. So in this series, they've kind of done this X-Men, Stranger Things angle with this government project.
Yeah, they go this whole route of him being, part of this government experiment that there's other people who have similar abilities and similar powers, so to speak, as him. And it's an interesting kind of conspiratorial thing, and I would say as a funnier Stranger Things kind of experiment, I enjoy it on those terms. Elijah Wood is entertaining to watch. Playing once again deer in the headlights. That kind of seems to be his thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can point out an Elijah Wood role in which his character isn't like a deer in the headlights. What? Hello?
Maniac, the remake of the 80s film Maniac.
Can you hear me? Movie.
Yeah, all I heard was Ack.
Maniac.
Maniac is good.
I have not seen Maniac.
He's also, what's that called? What's that movie, that Netflix movie that came out this year with the I'm Not Alone in This World?
I don't feel at home in this world anymore.
Also Deer in the Headlights, but in another way.
Oh, and Grand
Okay.
Piano.
Well, anyway.
Have you guys seen Grand Piano?
No.
That is a great movie.
The stuff that attracts me to the Dirk Gently TV series has nothing to do with the source material at all. Like,
well, you haven't even read it, so it couldn't.
But I can tell you've made it clear to me that it has nothing to do with the source material.
No,
like, I love Blackwing. What did you think of Fiona Dourif, Brad Dourif's daughter, as Bart?
That was probably my favorite element of the entire series. I was actually waiting to get to that. First of all, the fact that she's Brad Dourif's daughter makes so much fucking sense when you hear it, because she is just as crazy of an actor. Brad Dourif, his acting style is zero to batshit and nothing flat, and she has that same thing going for her. And I love her character. For those who have not seen the series, Bart is this character who shows up randomly in the first. Is it the second episode or the first episode? I think
she's in the first episode.
Okay. Well, her story arc begins with her murdering the fuck out of a person and chasing after another person, and stops herself from killing him at the last second just because he isn't the person that she set out to kill. And the only reason she stopped is because he said that he wasn't that person, and apparently everyone else that she's killed along the way she didn't give them a chance to answer. Maybe I don't know. She kills the fuck out of people, but as the story comes along, you find that there's a strange motive behind it that she's not even aware of, but the people she's killing turn out to be killed for good reasons. And that's kind of fascinating. I enjoy her interplay with Ken, the guy who Bart kidnaps, the one person that that she doesn't kill, because he goes through the ringer. His character goes from being scared as shit because he's basically been kidnapped by a psychotic killer to he goes through this Stockholm syndrome phase where he's pretty much been converted to her her line of thinking, and then it goes from there. I enjoyed that a lot. The main story between Dirk and Todd, played Todd's Elijah Wood. I don't think I mentioned that. It's entertaining, but I think that the main thing with it is that there's a lot of twists that the story makes, and the story runs at a pretty fast clip, to the point where it's kind of hard to follow every piece of logic. It is interesting when things come together. But I honestly think that this show could have resolved itself in less than the 8 episodes that the season gets.
I agree that I think the first few, but I don't know, because
the first 2 or 3 episodes of this show did not pull me in at all. It took until the 4th before I really started to catch on to it, and I would be very interested to compare this to the short-lived BBC series that also followed the same, the Dirk Gently character, because that series I also have not seen. Apparently, is a completely different interpretation of the concept, and I'm curious what they now that series only consists of 3 episodes and 1 pilot, but still, I will say this, Bill. I am interested to see season 2 because this did stoke my interest. I think the ending of season 1 threw me off a bit. Like the whole thing of suddenly he's got this disease that his sister had. I'm okay. Is the moral of the story that you get punished with disability for
A lot
for
of
being an
people,
asshole?
I've seen a lot of people like get SJW mad about that because they interpreted it that way. I don't think that that's what the intended meaning of it is. It's
And before
I don't know.
before
I
we
don't
start
have an
throwing out
answer
the
for
word
you.
SJW here, before we start pulling that out, let me just say that that's the message I got, and I am by no means someone who crusades
From the show.
Like,
Oh no, my other friend that watched the show, he was like, I loved it, but I didn't like Farah and I didn't like Friedkin because they were both kind of stereotypes of like strong independent woman and angry stupid white guy. And I was like, I didn't even think about that when I was watching it.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Anyway, so we
And again, well, I think another thing you brought up season 2. Both those characters get a lot more development in season 2. The great thing about season 2 is that like the case is new and they lay all that shit out. But I think the characters, the interactions are get more interesting from this point forward.
Now, one thing I will mention, because I do want to move on to the next topic, just because
Yes.
I don't want to deal too much in this. The season 1 does have a character who I am positive Max Landis created specifically to reference Plinkett in the Red Letter Media videos. The kind of the main antagonist of season 1 is this character Gordon Rimmer, who is this kind of portly, bearded dude who creeper who lives in his house and he talks like this.
Sometimes he talks like this.
Oh yeah,
there's a line he has where he's on the phone. He's like, "If a giraffe tried to kill you."
Yeah, I have no doubt whatsoever that Max Landis was specifically referencing Mr. Plinkett there, and that's okay. I don't know about
that. I don't know about in the writing, but I feel like he talked to that actor and told the actor to give sort of, because in fact, without getting into too spoilery territory here, like that character kind of has a split personality.
Yes.
He talks normal. Sometimes he talks like Plinkett.
Right. But for the most part, I would say he only really talks, quote, normal in a couple of scenes in the series. The rest of the time, he's in full-on mode.
Yeah, which I picked up on that when I first watched it, and I was like, yeah, it's charming. Plinkett's kind of the bad guy.
Which is, yeah, like I said, I'm fine with that, because Mr. Plinkett has always needed more character development. Anyway.
And in this, what do you, before we kick off, Gordon Rimmer, in his backstory, without getting into details, just like, yeah, you told me you like that stuff, and that stuff was more reminiscent of the book for you.
Well, the part of it,
I loved.
First of all,
I love the whole.
When I say reminiscent of the book, literally, Bill, the only thing that was reminiscent of the book in that is the concept of a spirit entering someone else's body, like the possession aspect. That's it. There was nothing else in that was reminiscent of the book. I only commented on it randomly because I was like, well, that's the first thing I've seen that has any resemblance to the book.
You can see why I liked the story, though.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
I don't want to go into details. Yeah, the quirkiness, the specific timeline references, and like, I wish I could go into more detail, but I do not want to spoil it for Hawk.
I will say, you know what I'll say, Bill? I'll close by saying this. This is my second favorite. This is my second favorite version of a crazy science fiction-y dimension and jumping series.
What's the first one?
Of course, Rick and Morty.
Right. And we talked earlier about Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, if they were, which they won't, but if they were to become the showrunners.
That would probably be one of the best choices you could make if you, because let's face it, Max Landis has got a lot to address, and so he's probably not coming back if they want to bring a new season.
The
He's not even
fact
writing
that
a new Bright movie.
right, well, the fact that Netflix, if you don't know, is co-producer, co-financier of Dirk Gently, and if they let him go for Bright, there's no way they're bringing him back for that. So
Yeah. Well,
I think as much as it, because I don't know if it's going to be the same show with, unless they can pay out the ass to get somebody really credible, which they can't. I don't think it's going to be the same show, and
yeah, it's probably not going to happen, and it's sad, but at the same time, you know, who knows? Maybe the next trick will be them attempting to do a Hitchhiker's Guide series.
That'd be cool.
It
could be interesting. Could be interesting.
There was already a Hitchhiker's Guide series from the BBC in the early '80s, and it wasn't great, but it had some potential. It basically, imagine the special effects of Doctor Who from that era, but with Hitchhiker's Guide humor. That's essentially what you got. Anyway,
right.
It
looks a lot like a Red Dwarf episode.
Worse.
I was going to say Red Dwarf might have had a higher budget than them.
Probably did. So we're going to move on to our next film. Now, Hawk, you watched Molly's Game. Tell us about that.
Yes. Molly's Game is the new Aaron Sorkin movie. He also directed it. This is his directorial debut. It is a very, very good movie. However, one of the big caveats is that this is the Sorkinist Aaron Sorkin has been in a long time. I mean, it's more Aaron Sorkin than Steve Jobs was. It's about on like a Social Network level of Aaron Sorkin's snarkiness in the script. It's about Molly Bloom, who at age 26, I think, she started running high stakes poker games, and the movie kind of starts. It works like a Social Network, but the movie starts towards the end of the story with Molly getting arrested by federal agents and taken to a lawyer, and then as she's talking to the lawyer, the movie starts to flash back onto where she started, how she got to the point where she was at, and then the movie can continue into what happens in the present time with the trial and so on and so forth. The movie's best element by far is Jessica Chastain. Like Cam, do you remember Miss Sloane?
I do.
Yeah. Jessica Chastain plays a very similar character to Miss Sloane, although it's interesting because you and I both remarked on the fact that Miss Sloane felt like an Aaron Sorkin light picture in terms of the dialogue and the writing, but it didn't really feel quite like Aaron Sorkin.
It felt like someone trying desperately to be Aaron Sorkin.
And it really stuck out.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing, and I was writing a review for this just for fun, and one thing that stuck out to me is that in an Aaron Sorkin movie, setting and dialogue pair very well together. So even if you have two characters talking, you have different characters talking, and one of them is talking about one thing, and the other one's talking about the other thing, and both their conversations kind of intertwined and feeling very one-sided, but they still drive the conversation. And the world they're in feels just energetic and off-kilter enough to work with Aaron Sorkin's dialogue, so it always feels like a very solid, cohesive piece. And I think that's one thing that is very distinctive about Aaron Sorkin is that when anyone else tries to do that, it's very obviously ramshackle.
So yeah, I mean, I have to say, with Aaron Sorkin, I've always been a bit mixed because on one hand, I think he is a very clever writer, but he can certainly be too clever by half. I think my favorite thing I've seen of his, I really was a fan of The Newsroom. Preachy though it might have been, it was never anything less than incredibly poignant. And it was a show that really ended too much before its time. Charlie Wilson's War is also a film that I thoroughly enjoy of his. Apparently Aaron Sorkin had a uncredited rewrite of Bulworth, the Warren Beatty movie.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that, and when I think about it, that completely makes sense.
Oh yeah, it makes total sense. He also was a writer on Moneyball.
Yeah.
And both Bulworth and Moneyball do not feel completely Sorkin. I think with the exception of Bulworth, he really needs the full package when it comes to Sorkin, because Moneyball was good, but it felt a little uneven with the writing. Sorkin's dialogue is very Sorkin in Molly's Game, and there's a lot of divisiveness on the internet. Like, a lot of people say the last third wasn't very good because it was kind of just flew off, not only flew with whales, but it didn't really come together like it should have. It was too Hollywood. However, I would say that's kind of true. However, it works with the sensationalization that Aaron Sorkin has done with the story. There are a lot of things in the story that did not happen in real life, in the real account of the story, but he made it so for the sake of a dramatic Aaron Sorkin movie. If I were to, I think next year I might start doing a top 10 scenes in movies of the year or whatever. Had I done that this year, I'd have to choose from probably 4 of them to make it onto this list. Because there are a lot of fantastic individual scenes. Idris Elba gets to do the Aaron Sorkin speech. I mean, every Aaron Sorkin movie has the Aaron Sorkin speech, right?
I'm sorry, your question was again?
What are you doing?
Well, I actually just sorry, I was just distracted because I was reading the Molly's Game summary here. Say that again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I should go back and summarize Molly's Game a little bit. You were muted when I started talking about it, but Molly Bloom, she basically gets recruited by a guy as an office assistant, and this guy has her start running these very, very high stakes poker games involving the Hollywood elite, hedge fund managers, very, very rich people with very high buy-in. Starts out as a $10,000 buy-in, and this boss character is a total, like everyone else in the movie, a very Aaron Sorkin character. He has her come to the office at 5 a.m. and to bring bagels. He's like, "Did you get these bagels from fucking like whatever the restaurant was?" And she's like, "Yeah, I did. Why? It's on the way to work." She's like, "Because this is the bagel that I would get from a fucking homeless shelter. I would go to a motherfucking homeless shelter and ask for the bagels, and this is what I would get. These are fucking poor person bagels. They'll never fucking bring them to me again." And stuff like that. He recruits her into helping run these high stakes poker games where she would, cash people out and give them their chips and stuff. At the end, he's like, "If any of you want to come back next week, tip Molly." So Molly starts making about 10 grand a week just off tips from these poker tournaments. And then her boss is a dick, so she takes all of her savings from running these games and migrates that poker game to a high-rise penthouse in Los Angeles. And then it becomes her project, so she's making even more money. She increases the buy-in to 50 grand. And people come every week and they blow all this money. And again, it's very, very high-profile people. One of the big things about this movie is that Molly ends up naming about 4 people in her book about the events. And she doesn't name anybody else. For everyone else, she uses aliases. And a big part of that is that there are several characters in this movie that are supposed to be stand-ins for the real people based on speculation. Nobody really knows except for Molly because she didn't disclose it in the book.
Right.
So Michael Cera plays a character. And I was reading something that Michael Cera is a very reliable comedic actor when he's cast to type, but when he is cast against type, he also does a really great job of playing a completely different character.
Right.
So in this movie, he plays a very he's menacing, but in a Michael Cera way. At one point in the movie mentions like, player X doesn't like winning money, or he doesn't like earning money. He likes winning money. He wants to take someone else's money by winning it and destroy their lives. And he says it's like, my favorite thing is destroying lives. So he was a great character. And there are rumors that was actually Tobey Maguire in real life. Like Tobey Maguire is the one who was really a thorn in Molly's side, because eventually he tries to take the game away from her. And so she moves the venue again to a New York penthouse for a $250,000 buy-in. So it just keeps going from there. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. One of the big things, though, is that she made very, very certain that every element of this poker tournament stuff was legal. And it was. She was operating completely within the confines of the law. At one point, she was accused of profiting off of gambling. And she's like, well, that law doesn't apply because poker is not a game of gambling. Poker is a game of luck and skill. And so it's a lot of little Sorkinisms sleep themselves in there into the story, but also kind of becoming part of the story, making it really interesting the way it's laid out. As far as
that's a very interesting logic, because I don't think conventional wisdom in any way, shape, or form holds that poker is anything but gambling. But
sure, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that she made a legal argument that won regarding that, and that's fine. But I don't know. I'm just
well, that wouldn't really factor into the story at all. That was just kind of her being a jackass. Everything she does in this movie, especially when it comes to Idris Elba and her father, played by Kevin Costner, is like picking a fight with them. Like, she's a very aggressive woman, very headstrong, has a good heart, but she's ready to fight. So that line was basically just a throwaway one where she was just like looking at his book and being like, "Oh, hey, by the way, fuck you." Idris Elba and Kevin Costner are both fantastic. One of my favorite scenes of the year is late in the movie. The dad comes out to New York to find her, and they sit down on a bench, and they do not like each other. They have not gotten along throughout their 3 or 4 scenes of the movie. He said, "Okay, here we go. We're going to do 3 years of therapy in 3 minutes." And she has to ask him a question, and he'll answer it and give it back to her. And so it's like a pretty quick piece of character development, but it worked well in the way that the characters did it.
According to Wikipedia, by the way, Michael Cera's character is a composite of Leonardo DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire, Ben Affleck, and other real-life poker players. That's interesting.
All of them were rumored to have been part of these tournaments.
Did anyone play themselves?
I don't think so.
Because
as far as I know, Idris Elba's lawyer character did not exist. He was created for the movie.
And of course, the truth is that, you know, this movie does, as you mentioned, depart from the reality of the story a little bit, which is, you know, fine to make a dramatic film. But yeah, I love the friggin' name of the book this is based on. Molly's Game. From Hollywood's elite to Wall Street's billionaire boys club, my high-stakes adventure in the world of underground poker by Molly Bloom.
Yep.
Jesus, that's a long name.
Yeah, the Idris Elba's lawyer character does take a few passes at the book and saying, like, you know, stuff about it, because he uses it as discovery and he actually reads it and gives her feedback. It's like, "Oh, on page 152, you mentioned the verticality of the city. That's not a real word." She's like, "It is a real word." And then they start talking about something else, and she's like, "I just emailed you the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary definition for verticality." So again, there's that huge snappiness to the dialogue, and there are a lot of it. The movie is told in voiceover as well from Jessica Chastain's character Molly, and that dials it back in terms of the Sorkin rapid fire dialogue. So it's interesting that she's telling the story. It's interesting the way it frames Sorkin's dialogue, because she's telling the story in a certain way. And then when the characters themselves are talking, they switch back into Sorkin mode. So it's almost like the way she's telling the story is a lot more colorful and energetic as Sorkin would tell it. Because Molly as the narrator is speaking from a real life perspective into a more fantastical story. Which was interesting. As far as the direction, you would think Aaron Sorkin's been doing this for years. There are a couple scenes that really don't work very well in the way they're staged, but in other areas, it's really, really well done, especially the poker scenes. I mean, it's while she's narrating, talking about it, it's like, "Oh, so-and-so has this house and a king and it's turned over. It could be a full house, but that's not as good as this person's flush if she gets turned over for this card." And it like brings card graphics up and circles them and annotates them. And it's like the very, very energetic poker sequences. It's kind of like gives you that Big Short feeling of like learning something, and you feel smarter when the movie's telling it to you because it's told so quickly and confidently.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check this movie out. I know it's coming to my area this weekend.
Oh, so, good.
Yeah. So
I really, really loved it. I think this may end up being one of the top 10, probably in the back half of the list, but it's fighting for a spot for sure.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next film that we have on our list, which is and Hawk, you're on the chopping block again with Beyond Skyline.
The chopping block?
Right. Well, yeah, as in it's your turn.
Beyond Skyline is a movie that I've been championing for the past few weeks, as you guys know. It's
You told me don't waste your time with Bright. Watch Beyond Skyline. That's what you said to me.
Yeah, I did. You guys talked about Bright last week, right?
What's that weird Michael Shannon movie everybody's talking about? Pottersville.
Pottersville?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about it?
Have you watched it?
Pottersville?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fucking horrible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So
Beyond
Beyond Skyline.
Yeah, Beyond Skyline.
I'll say that in a second, but Bill, I was starting to write a review for MCVX, or I always get MCVX or MCX.
What are we talking about?
Anyway, this website that I was going to write a review for, another one. I'm trying to like branch out to a couple different blogs and stuff. But my opening line of my Pottersville review is "Pottersville is hatred." That's what it is. Like,
okay,
it's fucking awful, Bill. You have to see it. I want you to see it and tell me what you thought, what went through your head as you watched it.
I need to double feature that with because I paid my Netflix bill and I know that Boss Baby is also on Netflix.
Boss
and you
Baby
asked me
is
to
on
watch
Netflix. Yes.
Yeah, you asked me to watch that as well.
Yes.
Wow, we're talking about a bunch of movies that I have no interest in ever seeing.
Ken, you got to watch Pottersville.
See, Pottersville's a Christmas movie, so with Christmas over, I'm gonna wait until next year.
Right on. I'll remind you.
I'll
remind you in 350 days.
Please do.
There you go.
Anyway,
so Beyond Skyline.
Did neither of you saw Skyline? Right?
I never saw Skyline. Is Jamie Foxx in that?
No, Donald Faison.
Donald Faison's in that?
Faison? Yeah. Is it Faison? Yeah, Faison from Scrubs.
Scrubs, yeah.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
So I didn't watch Skyline. All I know is that the people who made Skyline were special effects people who allegedly stole like material from Battle Los Angeles and made a movie based on that. I think the lawsuit was settled or something or dismissed, but either way, that's what they were accused of.
Still working with that studio, so yeah. But the Strauss brothers, I think, they run this VFX company called Hydraulics, and they made Skyline, and it's fucking garbage. I mean, Skyline had an interesting concept, which really alien invasion movies aren't horrific anymore. They're just kind of like adventure or action movies. Skyline kind of brings it back to a horror story, where this mothership shines down blue light, and anybody who looks at the blue light, they get into a trance and they walk towards the blue light, and they get sucked up en masse into the mothership. And I'm talking thousands of screaming people getting sucked up into a saucer, which is really scary when you think about it. The visuals were kind of good. I mean, it was fine for all being all VFX. Like, you could tell the artistry was there. However, all that money was spent on the VFX budget, so almost the entire movie took place in a single apartment room with people looking out through the window and be like, "Oh my god, aliens are invading!" and not much else. So it was a very, very flat, very boring, and very shitty movie.
I heard the dialogue is terrible in it too.
The dialogue is horrible, and it's just when I saw it, I couldn't immediately think of a movie that I hated more.
Wow.
And then I saw the trailer for Beyond Skyline almost a decade later is when this is coming out. And it's a completely different thing in terms of like the scope. It's got, have you seen the trailer, Ken?
No. I didn't know that this was a movie that existed until you told me about it. And I've avoided any kind of trailers or anything on I don't know. Just sell me on seeing the movie, because now I couldn't care less.
I will. So first of all, Frank Grillo is the main star.
Okay.
He's going
to be more than that.
I liked him in Wheelman.
Yeah, I like Frank Grillo, but you need more than that.
Yeah, no, there will be. Trust me.
Keep going.
The movie opens to run parallel to the original Skyline, so these take part in a different part of the city. His Frank Grillo's son has been arrested for getting into a fight, and he goes to pick him up. And it turns out this had to do with something to do with the mom dying, and that was kind of the son had all this pent up anger, but that doesn't really matter that much. They go into the subway because the aliens are attacking, so they run down there, and eventually they run from the aliens, and they get up there and they get sucked into the mothership. But all this happens after like a number of really wacky things. So there is a blind war veteran named Sarge, who is begging for money. He joins the group. There is this kind of giant walking alien thing that has a hand on its mouth, and it sucks people up with a tongue and then takes them up to the mothership. So all these characters get taken to the mothership. In there they realize the aliens are running this kind of thing where they suck out humans' brains that they've abducted and deposit them into these alien bodies, these exoskeletons, so they can take over the Earth. Frank Grillo and his friends aren't having any of that shit. So they shoot some aliens, and then at the end of the first Skyline, the main character and his pregnant girlfriend are sucked into the mothership. His brain gets sucked out and dropped into an alien exoskeleton. And when somebody's brain gets put into an alien exoskeleton, the eyes glow blue because the alien's controlling the brain. His eyes glow red because his brain overpowered the exoskeleton thing, and he fights off aliens, and that's the end of the first Skyline. It just stops right there for some fucking reason. In this movie, Frank Grillo runs into the same character because this would have been maybe 20 minutes after he got abducted in the first movie. And they decide to fight their way to this like control center where Frank Grillo can get out and try to save his son. They also find the pregnant girlfriend who gives birth, but the thing is she's been pregnant for 2 weeks. And this baby, because it's a hybrid of alien and human DNA, it is growing rapidly, and it could be the key to the humanity's survival. Then they go to Lao, where the two main characters of the raid are, and they are two main characters in this movie.
Oh, okay, because this movie has to play in China, so.
Well, it's Indonesia, but actually, I would say that this does not feel like a play to just entice Eastern viewers. It feels like a deliberate choice to add more culture to the movie, because Lao is a really cool setting in this movie. It's like lots of really great shots of the landscape, and adding different ethnic characters was really cool. So yes, okay. Iko Uwais is in this movie, and there comes a point where all at once Frank Grillo has a blade on his arm. He's fighting aliens. Iko Uwais and the other actor who plays the villain in the raid, they're doing martial arts on the aliens, and then another brain is put into a giant kaiju-style monster fighting another one, and so all this stuff's happening all at once. This movie is fucking insane, and I loved it.
Okay.
You get the sense that the first Skyline was just kind of a shitty movie with some good ideas, and the sequel is that movie was kind of dumb, right? So how much more dumb can we make the sequel in an awesome way? Like, you can tell that every single person in this movie is having a lot of fun and is 100% into the story they're telling, as ridiculous as it is. And I think that's what makes it different, is that everybody's just having fun and making a stupid movie. It's not made intentionally bad. In fact, for a first-time director, it's Liam O'Donnell, who wrote part of the first Skyline and was a VFX supervisor. He's got a good eye, and he's making a serious movie, but it's a very fun movie also.
Okay.
This will probably be an honorable mention for me on the end of your list, because it's kind of bad, but it's really fun. It knows exactly what it's doing, and it's just something that everybody should probably see, because it's just that entertaining. Like, the first half is an alien invasion horror drama, kind of. The second half is almost a straight adventure film, just with all the pushback against the aliens and like the ridiculous action and just the crazy shit that they do is so much fun. And there was even a shot where it kind of confirmed for me, like 100%, this is supposed to be a dumb movie. Frank Grillo's character like sniffs his armpit and then like nods, like, yeah, that's all right. It's during an arming up montage sequence where they go to this weapons bunker and start picking out like RPGs and rifles, and it's like, yeah, Frank Grill's like, yeah, like I got this weapon, and then he like sniffs his armpit. It's like, oh yeah, just nods, and it's just like a really weird nonverbal moment that I was like, okay, this movie is goofing around.
All right, well, that's.
What do you think?
You've sold me enough that if this becomes like a Netflix movie or an Amazon Prime movie, I will see it. Okay. But I'm not going to pay to see it. So yeah, you sort of sold me.
I haven't watched it in a week or so it's not as fresh in my mind. But when I watched it the first time, there was several moments where I was like, yes, that's fucking awesome. You know, the kaiju fight was like, it's like fist pumping. It's just a blast.
Oddly enough, I had that same feeling watching Pubcast Better Together.
Really? Yeah, I didn't. I was like, can I not watch this so I can get back to my video games?
I think at the point of the CGI dog dancing disco music, that's when I just realized this movie is for me. This is basically a 90-minute Everything is Terrible movie that Everything is Terrible didn't do.
Yeah, that's definitely for you, Bill Leon. That's definitely a selling point for you. I think you ought to see Pubstar. For those that don't know, Ken and I are doing our annual shituary, themed month
marathon
of terrible movies. Yeah, marathon. 4 movies per week. Each week has a specific theme. This week's theme is kids' movies with talking animals. So this one we just watched is Pubstar Better Together, the sequel to a movie about a talking, pop-singing celebrity dog.
Yes, and in this one, it's also about talking, singing dogs. And let's just put it this way: there's a Rastafarian dog in this, voiced by Ziggy Marley.
Yep. There is a talk show called Jimmy Kibble.
Oh no!
Yeah,
there are race relations. Have you watched the whole thing, Ken?
I have about 10 minutes left in it. So
okay, so you've already gotten to the part where this gangster, like vagrant gang leader cat, she's talking about getting access to the nightclub and getting paid equal, and one guy's like, equal pay for a cat, and it's like, hello, Bright,
wow,
with your thinly veiled race relations.
Yeah. Oh, this goes there, and also, Bill, there's a dog rock band called Mötley Crüe. I'm just saying it. This movie is so full of shitty dog puns.
Yeah, the puns are really bad in this movie.
Yeah, we'll get into more of that later because Hawk and I we have a entire podcast that we're going to be recording this weekend about this week's episodes. So anyway, we're going to move on to a movie that I saw, All the Money in the World.
Let's just, again, we'll talk about this too, but let's just once again applaud Ridley Scott. The man is inconsistent as a director, but he finished his movie, then the allegations against Kevin Spacey came out, and then he's like, you know what? Kevin Spacey's fired. I will hire Chris Plummer. I'm going to stick to that release date. And in 9 motherfucking days, he reshoots all of Christopher Plummer's scenes for
all
of
Kevin Spacey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, the scenes with Christopher Plummer. In 9 fucking days, he just reshot that shit and finished the movie.
Not only that, but speaking as someone who saw this movie, those scenes do not feel like they were rushed. They don't feel like they stick out or in any way like it's like, for instance, Fantastic Four a few years ago had notorious reshoots where you can tell from shot to shot what was a reshoot and what was actually shot during the principal photography.
Kate Mara's wig.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's just one example. But here's the thing. This movie does not even show the slightest seam. There's even a scene where they probably had to use CGI to paint him into a scene because it would have cost too much otherwise. And I didn't even really notice any problems with that. Yeah. they killed it from a technical perspective in erasing Kevin Spacey's ass stank from this movie.
And that's crazy too. And then like Kevin Spacey is just like, he's who knows what he's doing right now.
Crying into a pile of all the money he already has.
Probably because every single review is like, oh, Christopher Plummer's amazing. He's so good in this movie.
And being fair, Ridley Scott said in an interview that Kevin Spacey did a good performance too, but he's, for obvious reasons, there was, here the considerations he took into this. Not only did he need to get rid of Kevin Spacey for moral reasons, but financially, it would have been irresponsible for him to not do it, because this movie would not have had any kind of a theatrical release. And this is a movie that is of a quality that basically guarantees that it's going to have a nice long award season run.
And Plummer was Ridley Scott's first choice as well. And the studio told him, no, you need somebody bigger, so they got Kevin Spacey.
Right.
Plummer was the original choice, which I think makes it even better.
Now, first of all, it doesn't even make sense for Kevin Spacey to have been cast to begin with, because J. Paul Getty, J. Paul Getty was in his 80s when the events that this film takes place in.
Right. And Plummer's 88.
Right. Now, Plummer is a few years older than J. Paul Getty was when he died, but roughly, the same decade. Kevin Spacey, though, considerably younger. And there's only one scene in the film in which you see a younger J. Paul Getty. So the plot of All the Money in the World, for those who don't know, is the true story of in 1973, the grandson of J. Paul Getty, also named J. Paul Getty, but J. Paul Getty III, also known as just Paul, I guess. But anyway, J. Paul Getty III was kidnapped, and when he was kidnapped, there were rumors that his kidnapping had to do with him having himself kidnapped, because he was known to talk about it. What the fuck was that?
Something on Bill's end.
I guess so. So they're just
that was me. Sorry.
Anyway, so it was kind of unclear, and famously, when confronted by the media and asked if he would pay the ransom, the $17 million ransom, billionaire J. Paul Getty defiantly said no. He wouldn't pay a cent.
Right.
And it's really fascinating, that's
Getty eventually said in an interview that if he had done that, given the money, that would open the doors to terrorists, knowing that if they did kidnap the child of a rich person, they would get paid. It sounds like he probably still is an asshole, but he said part of his intention was to not begin that trend of telling people it was okay to kidnap a person for money.
Right. And it was known that apparently Getty III had spoken out. Like he joked to friends that he could get a lot of money if he faked a kidnapping and something, and the wrong people got the right the right people got the wrong idea and actually went through with it. And the story of the Getty family is a goddamn fucking decades-long tragedy, because if you look at the story of every member of the Getty family since this incident, so much drug abuse and failure, it is just depressing. And this film kind of is a weird origin story for the destruction of a wealthy a wealthy new money family. And the dominating theme of this film, even though he's only in probably, I would say, 20 minutes of this film, Christopher Plummer's character is J. Paul Getty. They make it absolutely clear that he was everything that is wrong with just the money grubbing, the upper class, the people who believe in trickle down economics, so to speak. You need to make money for yourself. Reportedly, J. Paul Getty never invested in any charities. He was well known as a miser to the point where he even had payphones installed in his house because no one who used the phone in his house should should run up phone bills for this guy who's a fucking millionaire. And it's I don't want to get too much into it because this movie is a really taut thriller that there's some twists in it that even if you know the story, the way the film tells it is so compelling. I just recommend you seek it out. And Plummer's performance for a performance that was done in 9 days, just as quickly as possible, is one of the year's best and one of his best as an actor. I can't help but be glad that Kevin Spacey is not in this film any longer.
I'll have to see that. Yeah, I mean, especially because I liked Kevin Spacey, but man, that makeup was fucking distracting in the trailers.
Oh, and
and he didn't even sound like his voice, like when he talked at that one line. It's like, what would you donate to save the kid? Nothing. And it's like kind of like weirdly muffled, like his face was constricted, and it just wasn't it was not the right role for the actor.
Something that I think is kind of funny is the actor who plays John Paul Getty III is the actor Charlie Plummer, not related to Christopher Plummer.
Oh yeah, I did read that.
So the weird irony of the replacement of Kevin Spacey is now you have both people named J. Paul Getty in this film are played by a plumber.
Right.
If you're not familiar with Charlie Plummer, some of his other films that he was in Not Fade Away, the music movie. He was in Boardwalk Empire, Person of Interest, stuff like that.
I do like Person of Interest.
So I think he was only in like an episode of that, but yeah. Still,
that's a fun ass show. If you've not watched that,
I have not.
That is a very fun show.
You would say it's a show of interest?
Yeah.
So moving on, the next film we're going to be talking about, Hawk.
Star Wars?
You need to tell us, what did you think of The War in the Stars, The Final Jedi?
The Star War?
Yes.
So one of my favorite YouTube channels, Your Movie Sucks.org, he ended up giving The Last Jedi a 5 or a 6 out of 10 because he generally does not give much of a shit about Star Wars either way. But he began his review by saying, for those of you that were going into this expecting a huge, life-changing masterpiece of a film, what the fuck are you thinking? This is a sci-fi movie about laser swords. And I think that's a really good point because the hype for Star Wars is out of control. People were so excited. And I was excited too, like guessing this and that, but I didn't give much thought to it, except, when I had to. I was like, oh, I wonder if Star Wars is going to have a part where Rey turns evil or something like that. But there are people who are boycotting this movie. Like they're like, oh, it ruined my childhood. And then there's somebody who started an online petition on change.org to remove Star Wars: The Last Jedi from the Star Wars canon. Like, it's Change.org is like a really important website for some petitions on certain things, and they're using a space on that website for a fucking Star Wars movie, and I think that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I didn't like The Last Jedi all that much, but you're right. That's pretty fucking overblown.
Yeah, like I wish I had enough shit to not worry about in my life so I could spend my time worrying about a fucking Star Wars movie. But as far as The Last Jedi, I liked it. It was pretty good. I think there were a few things that were issues, like at the very beginning, when Poe called General Hux, and he's like, "Oh, I'm on hold. I have something to say about your mother," and that's not Star Wars. And like Poe had a couple other phrases he threw out that were distinctly, mid 2000s and not anything at all Star Wars. It was.
Here's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of the scene in Terminator 3 where Arnold Schwarzenegger says "talk to the hand."
Yeah, like it's even worse here though, because while you might have dated references in this movie that will date the movie later on, this has never been done in a Star Wars movie. Like, I know that Rian Johnson wanted to make a fun movie, but you don't do that with Millennial Lexicon in a space opera. So that was kind of frustrating. I still like all the characters. I admire the fact that each of the main core characters have kind of been pulled away from their archetypes that were in The Force Awakens. I think that's good because it is no longer a proto Star Wars original trilogy. It's its own thing. So I'm glad they didn't do I'm glad they didn't do Empire Strikes Back reheated for The Last Jedi. The middle portion I thought was super boring, with Finn and Rose going to the casino planet. I thought that casino planet was prequel level bad. Everything about it, the weird CGI, the wacky creatures, the shenanigans, I thought that entire sequence was just awful. And I wanted nothing more than to get back to the Luke and Rey training stuff on the island.
You know what? I didn't have as much of a problem with the casino scene itself, except for the fact that the entire plot line in that film, from beginning to end, involving Finn and Rose, was just a waste of my goddamn time.
It was a waste of the movie's time because nothing they do impacts the story in any way.
Not to mention, and we got in spoilers last week about this, so I may as well throw it out here.
Yeah.
The single dumbest moment in the entire Star Wars canon, in my opinion, occurs when Finn is about to essentially save the day and, obviously kill himself in doing it. And she decides to make a decision that, for the logic of Star Wars being that nobody important dies unless they have, the script demands it, she decides to fucking crash into him.
A move which probably might have killed both of them anyway.
It should have in all rights. I
thought that was bad too. I really like the character of Finn. I think he's a really good character. I liked
him in the first film. He's not a character in this movie.
He's fucking useless in this movie.
And Rose is I really hate to say this because I don't think her character was put into this movie for any reason other than demanded that they have another female character in the film besides another one who just to add another one to balance out the story. It felt like a demographic choice.
I was totally shipping Finn and Rey, and I'm really I don't agree with Finn and Rose being a romantic pairing.
Hell, I would have preferred what some other people were shipping, Finn and Poe.
Well, yeah, that too, but that's never going to happen. But yes, I was probably more shipping those two. But I would also ship Rey and Finn.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Force Awakens does heavily imply some Finn and Poe action there.
Oh yeah, totally. So I'm curious to see J.J. Abrams come back to the final franchise. I did also hear that a lot of what was set up in The Force Awakens with Snoke and this and that was really just done so without any clear-cut plan of what was going to happen later on.
Oh, that's painfully obvious in this film.
Exactly. So you can tell in this film that Rian Johnson is either continuing a plot that does not exist with his own blueprint, or is actively dismantling everything that was done in The Force Awakens in terms of plot setup. And regardless of what it is, it sticks out in a really bad way.
Yeah, it really pains me because I really thought watching Force Awakens, I felt like they had a direction they were going in, and this film made it clear to me that they didn't. And
yes,
to be honest, while there were moments in this, there was enough in this movie that I was entertained by that I give it a mild pass. but I still have to rip a lot of it. And the fact is, this is the last time I think I'm ever going to go into a Star Wars movie with a sense of that childhood nostalgic awe. I think from now on, going into a Star Wars movie, it was seriously, watching that movie was like losing a little piece of my childhood. I'm not saying that this movie raped my childhood or anything like that. It's the feeling where I don't think go into another Star Wars movie think with that sense of reckless childlike abandonment.
Oh, I don't do that with almost anything in my life in general, so I agree with you there. But
I went into even by the third prequel, I was still going into the Star Wars movie with that feeling. And Force Awakens I did because I think I got on kind of the train of interest. And even Rogue One, I rode that. Rogue One's a deeply flawed movie that I still went in with that feeling. This movie found a way to kill that part of me.
I thought it had a really frustrating frequency of plot conveniences. It's like, this hacker is in the exact same cell as we are. How strange! And
don't get me wrong. Star Wars is all about the serial style conveniences, but this was more than it should have.
It was. You could see the framework of the plot.
Not only that, but the crassness of some of the things, like introducing these child characters, which is, in my opinion, it felt those child characters on that planet, like the kids who were slaves, it felt like set up for some sort of kids Star Wars spin-off. Disney Kids presents Slave Kids of Planet Casino.
What was it? It's like Disney XD.
Exactly. It was.
Yeah, it really did feel like that. I completely agree with you on there. It's just, ugh. Somebody asked me, so Last Jedi, what do you think? I said, I think it was a really flawed movie with some really awesome moments.
Yeah, there were some awesome moments.
I thought that the whole when Laura Dern did a hyperdrive through the Star Destroyer through Snoke's ship, I thought that was fucking cool.
That actual moment was good, but I made this complaint last week too. I think Laura Dern's character was kind of pointless because all she was it felt like, you know what it felt like to me? It felt like Carrie Fisher's performance wasn't actually as fully filmed as they said it was, and they had to, at the last minute, insert another person to do the scenes that her character should have been doing. It should have been Princess Leia making that decision and her character dying in that scene. First of all, there is no reason for her character to have lived through this movie. I know they made that promise last year, out of respect for her. We're not going to kill Princess Leia off.
Right.
But I'm just going to say, from a practical perspective, why not? We don't need her anymore in this film.
Right.
And yes, she didn't get to film a death scene or anything, and I understand that. But there were at least 2 moments in this film where they could have had her character die, and it would have felt poignant. And yes, it would have been sad, but it would have closed her character out in a believable way.
Oh, I am glad that she got her reunion with Luke, though.
Don't get me started on the astral projecting Luke bullshit.
That was dumb. That was dumb. But when I say Leia and Luke reunited, I really want to say Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher together on screen again.
Yeah,
I think that was a necessary piece of the film, and I'm so glad they got to do that.
I guess.
I liked the throne room fight a lot. I thought that was really cool.
I liked that, and I also completely was okay with the fact that they got rid of Snoke, because I think, and I again mentioned this last week, that Snoke was a mistake to begin with. Having
He's just another proto-Emperor Palpatine.
Exactly. There was nothing his character served other than as being like a replacement for that, and I think that's one of the few things that they really got right in this film is they said, you know what, this whole Snoke thing, kind of lame. Let's just, let's see what we can.
Kind of gave Kylo Ren his full villain status as well.
admittedly, this movie does set up. There is a possibility that this new trilogy can be completely redeemed in my eyes. This film, while it was a stumbling point, the setup of Kylo Ren and Rey and the positions that they end with in this film has some very interesting dramatic potential. The idea of Jedi as a concept no longer being the black and white, right and wrong, and the idea of this gray area, which of course in the expanded universe, I know they have the gray Jedi concept, which I've mentioned before. If they find a creative way to build on that, sort of embracing the good and the bad, and that finally bringing true balance to the Force, then that would be intriguing. I would be okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. One of the big problems with this one is that nothing really happens in this movie to do anything else with the rest of the franchise. It sets those characters up to get those situations, but as far
as they were
as
already kind of in that position at the beginning of the movie too.
Kind of there, yeah. And all the movie does is like, yes, you're mostly right about that. But as far as the events of the film, nothing changes the pieces on the board except for Snoke dying. It's like, oh, at the end of the first movie, the First Order is still a bad thing, and Rey has a lightsaber. At the end of the movie, it's like, well, all those things are still there, and Rey learns some Jedi stuff from Luke, and that's it.
How interesting is it, by the way, that both films, this one and Force Awakens, the climax of the film is essentially a main character from the original trilogy dying.
Right.
Maybe that was their plan for the last one, is to have Carrie Fisher die at the end of the third one, but they can't do that anymore.
Right.
Actually, that's going to be the most fascinating piece of creative Disney Hollywood screenwriting is going to be how they write Carrie Fisher out of this next film, because they had so many opportunities to do it here that actually would have worked. The fact that they didn't take them says either they already have a good idea of what they're going to do, or they're in a fucking panic right now because they haven't the slightest clue.
Right. Vulture published a really funny article called "The 10 Horniest Things in Star Wars: The Last Jedi."
Oh God!
But this movie definitely fucks. One is Kylo Ren takes his shirt off.
Oh God! Adam Driver. I'm sorry, I don't get the whole sexy Adam Driver thing. The guy, I mean, he's kind of weird looking. I'm not someone to speak, but
he's got a sexual energy to him.
I mean, maybe the same way that, like, at one point Crispin Glover might have been a looker. I don't know. There's a creepiness to him that
I don't mind him. I like Adam Driver. He's a good actor.
No, I like Adam Driver. I'm just saying, to call him sexy is baffling to me.
I mean, this is obviously supposed to be a goofy article, because number 2 is Kylo and Ren's whole thing in italics. They said they still let's see. Kylo and Rey never make out, but they still share the Last Jedi's sexiest scene, as well as a telepathic connection fostered by the sinister voyeur Snoke, the galaxy's mightiest cuck.
Oh God!
And well, how about that moment where Kylo kills his mentor? It's always hot when a space goth murders his lazy magician.
Jesus Christ!
There's a really, number 3 is all the sexual height differences.
On the list.
What?
What was number 1 on the list? Just jump to number 1.
Well, I don't think it was an ordered list, but the first entry was Kylo Ren takes his shirt off. Poe rubbing BB-8's quote-unquote tummy.
Yeah, I
mean, it's a deliberate joke article written by a guy, but
we do need to move on to another film, but before I do that, I just want to say one thing, because this is the thing that a lot of people are probably the most ridiculously the most ridiculous butthurt that I've seen about Star Wars Last Jedi is the Porgs. Like, some people love them, and some people just get bent out of shape about how much they hate them.
Merchandising.
Merchandising. Spaceballs the flamethrower.
Yeah, that is exactly what those things are.
They are, although I will say that the explanation they gave makes a lot of sense. That island that they were filming on is famous for its puffin population, and there are literally thousands of puffins on that island. And they realized that it was going to be so expensive to paint all of them out of the movie that they basically said, well, why don't we just develop something that we can do to alter them into these creatures, because it'll be slightly cheaper, you can sell them.
Right. I mean, they're fine. It's just like, I don't care.
The only thing that kind of bothered me is the scene in which Chewbacca's eating one, that we were deprived of the chance to see him just take a big fucking bite of that.
That was a pretty funny.
It was funny. Was pretty funny. I just would have loved if Chewbacca had just a big bite of it, and that's when we saw the doe eyes that one of them had.
Right. I am glad that those things were just kind of indigenous creatures, because in the first trailer for The Last Jedi, Chewbacca in the Millennium Falcon, he like does his roar, and then the camera pans out, and a Porg is like, "Wah!" I was like, that better not be Chewbacca's new buddy that takes the place of Han Solo, because that's an awful replacement. But it wasn't, so I prefer what they did with this now. I don't think they're very interesting or fun. It's cool, the story behind why they came about, but it really still it's impossible for me not to think of it like just a merchandising push. Which is, I believe somebody was on record saying that that's the whole reason the Cars franchise exists, is for that, because that is by far Disney's most lucrative property in the Pixar wheelhouse is Cars, and they keep making those to keep driving the merchandising, no pun intended. So that's the only thought I have with those.
Well, and this is going to be actually the shortest duration that we've ever seen between Star Wars movies, because Solo: A Star Wars Story is currently slated for May 25th.
It's rumored to be in deep trouble.
Yeah,
like somebody was saying, somebody who was, I work at Disney, maybe, they're saying this movie might not come out. It might be just canceled because it's been so fucked, because the Lord and Miller got got fired, and somebody had to hire an acting coach for Alden Ehrenreich, and then John Williams is composing the main theme for Solo, but not the score. It's like it's got so much problems. I almost believe those reports that it might not even come out.
It's gotten a lot of trouble, and I'll be honest, the bringing Ron Howard in is, I mean, if there's anyone who can at least make it competent, it should be him. But Ron Howard is a very competent director who I don't think has the ability to rise above material. He has the ability to make material work, but I don't think he's. Did I just hear your cell phone?
It's all the way across the room.
I heard it. So, yeah.
Have you seen the poster, the supposed poster?
Where it just says Solo? Yeah.
No, not that one. The one that has the characters. It does not look good.
Okay, I'm looking it up right now. Is it one of those bad Photoshop jobs?
No, it's worse. Rumored to be a fake. However, it's the one.
Is it the one that just says that has just a picture of Alden Ehrenreich on it?
No. It's kind of like gold. It's a golden colored. Has Alden Ehrenreich and then Donald Glover behind him, and then the girl behind him, and then Chewbacca behind them. And then
the one. Falcon. Okay, I just pulled that one up. Solo: A Star Wars. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh no.
I don't think it's a real I don't think it's a real poser, but but it might be.
That cannot be real. Fucking Donald Glover, his head is so photoshopped onto that
Yeah.
it's not even funny.
At the same time, though, I can't remember when either of them had. It must be photoshopped from set photos because I've never seen either of them with that hair look and facial look.
I find it interesting that the casting of Alden Ehrenreich that he's like that they supposedly had to bring in like an acting coach for him.
Yeah, it's weird.
Well, he was what the fuck was he in besides like Hail Caesar?
He was in what was it?
Character in Hail Caesar worked because his character was a like cowboy actor and he wasn't expected to be a good actor, and the stiltedness of it fit with that.
Yeah.
Okay, he was in Beautiful Creatures and he was in Blue Jasmine?
He was in Rules Don't Apply. That was the one he's dating the girl or whatever.
Yeah, okay. Wow, he's managed to be in a lot of friggin' like movies directed by famous directors.
Yeah.
That's
few of which were actually that great.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if that movie works.
It won't.
Like I said, I'm no longer going into a film with a sense of childlike glee. I'm going into it with trepidation.
Yes, as well you should.
And now the final film of the night, I'm going to talk about briefly The Ballad of Lefty Brown.
So, I'm a documented I'm not that interested in Western films, but you kind of sold me on this when you were talking about it.
So The Ballad of Lefty Brown is a Western it had a very small theatrical release. It played like South by Southwest, and then in mid-December it had a small release, and then it went pretty much straight to VOD. It stars Bill Pullman as Lefty Brown, and Lefty Brown is the archetypal classic Western goofy sidekick character. And the concept of this movie is basically kind of creative in that it's a film that follows that character as the lead rather than the lead character. The movie opens up with the archetypal lead cowboy character being brutally fucking murdered, and this poor, aw shucks kind of goofy sidekick is left to solve his friend's murder. And what's interesting about this film is while this sounds like it could be like a high concept comedic film, it's really not. It deals with it from a very kind of realistic and believable angle. And poor Lefty, this is, first of all, this is probably Bill Pullman's most dramatic performance for a long time.
So it's not very comedic at all.
It has comedic elements, but it's not a comedy.
Okay.
It's basically how I would describe Lefty Brown as a character is a truly tragic character. He has been the sidekick of this other person for years, but he's never really been in the spotlight. The other cohorts of this guy kind of look down on him as the no account. The wife, the widow of his friend who was killed, doesn't believe in him and thinks that he's just a hanger-on. He finds out that like frontier Western dime novel literature has been written about his friend, and he's nowhere to be seen in any of these novels, despite the fact that he's always been there. And literally everyone else that they've hung around with is in these novels. And that makes for a very dramatic moment because you kind of see on his face where it's like, it doesn't bother him that much, but it should. because he's not as dumb as people say he is. You know, he's got a bit of frontier wisdom. He just happens to be, you know, he's not the wisest person in the world, but he has wisdom that that he has built over the years, and over the course of the film, he just tries to, in the best way that he can, he tries to solve the mystery of who murdered his friend, and it turns out that excuse me, and it's not too much of a spoiler to say that it turns out to be some people who you know, who he trusted, and it's you know, it's kind of a tragic and poignant little story, and yet it's also redeeming because it really does give this character a chance. It's like if you've ever seen the John Wayne movie Rio Bravo. If you have, it's as if the entire film focused on Stumpy.
Okay.
That's
cool. Like that's the kind of thing that would interest me. Like that it's not a conventional Western movie, so I'm all about.
What's interesting is
kind of different ones.
This is a movie that starts when conventional Westerns have ended. And it still has a lot of conventional Western elements, but it subverts them in almost every angle. And I really enjoyed that. It's not a perfect movie. It does have a few frontier conventions that are there. But you know what? It subverts I would say the vast majority of them, and it has some solid performances. Jim Caviezel in this film plays a character who's the governor of the state, and it's been a long time since I've seen Jim Caviezel in anything, so that was.
I think I last saw him in Escape Plan, and that was years ago.
Right, and some other interesting things. Peter Fonda is in this movie for all of 5 minutes. He's the classic frontier hero character. So we already have what happened to him.
Oh, Jim Caviezel's in Person of Interest. Sorry.
Oh,
I don't know why I spaced that. He's the main character in Person of Interest that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
So yeah, that show that you were talking up. That's funny. Anyway, so I recommend it. I'm not going to go into too much because you do want to see this movie.
Yeah.
But if anything, this movie is Bill Pullman's meatiest performance that he's had for years.
Is the voice distracting?
Like the voice he uses?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not as pushed as far as, say, Stumpy and Rio Bravo.
Okay.
He does have a little bit of that wooey kind of thing going about it, but it's not. He made a wise decision to play it believably like a person who has that kind of persona, but it isn't like the full. Oh, word, that's good. That's yeah.
Right. All right, good.
Which, if he chose to go full out that way, it would have been intriguing, but it wouldn't have. It's just a more realistic performance of that same archetype.
Okay.
So that's really all I'm going to say about the film until you've had a chance to see it.
All right.
Intrigued by how you take it, but I was so happy with a good Western because Westerns are my favorite genre, and it seems like every year for the last 3 or 4 years, there's been at least one decent one that's come out.
Right.
And I'm glad that it's a genre that hasn't fully died out. I mean, these movies are not getting big theatrical releases. As long as I get a bone tomahawk every once in a while, I think I'll be happy.
Yeah.
So next week we've got some other interesting movies to discuss, but things up by saying bye.
Bye.
I got nothing.
Oh, yeah, me neither.